Let's go!
So yeah, there's a lot of Rebirth news coming out. I get it. There is a whole bunch of this news, and I'm still like sort of teetering on the edge here. Someone brought up some sort of crazy Twitter thing earlier today, and I appreciate the defense force aspect of this stuff. I do, but I think I want to briefly, until my throat closes, talk about fandom. And I don't know if I've gotten into this, but I feel like for the sake of a few of the things that we're invested in, you know, Final Fantasy and fighting games and all this kind of shit, it's been pretty largely understood for a very long time that, like, oh man, the fandoms are the worst. Do you think to a certain degree, yes, like some of this shit is pretty brutal. But again, I've been at several different spots to see like true fans and all this kind of stuff, and it's like, whoa, this is something else. So I only have a couple comparisons. Yeah, Final Fantasy VII is pretty brutal because it's a huge game. It's a huge game that influenced a ton of people's lives. So you're going to get just a huge, giant swath of fandom from the hardest of the hardcore to, you know, folks like myself, which I'm completely honest. People look at me as being a hardcore Final Fantasy VII fan, and it is my favorite game of all time, but I've arguably played it maybe less than 10 times my entire life. And the way I approach fandom with things is that I don't generally obsess over it that much, because I prefer to keep the relationship with the game kind of fresh. So I don't just want to like grind it out, find things that I dislike with games, right? So I'm not even played my favorite game of all time 10 times. I haven't. That might seem like blasphemous to some people. How do you don't even like this game? Those are rookie hours, bro. I've been in a unique situation to actually interact with a lot of developers for a lot of franchises of games. And I can say for one thing specifically is that for some reason, and I'll try to go into the reasons of my fandom, much less my ability to express fandom for things, has gotten me into a place where I'm able to like talk with the people that actually like make these games and have like one-on-one times with the folks that are responsible for these things. And it isn't just Final Fantasy VII, it's a lot of franchises, dude. Much less becoming actually a part of some of the shit that I truly loved growing up and obviously feel like I'm a huge fan of. I think I can confidently say that a lot of devs are kind of terrified of hyper fans. And we're sort of seeing it happen right now, where there's a lot of people expressing thanks to the Final Fantasy VII developers for what they're doing. Nojima stuff recently was kind of disgusting, right? We're getting like death threats and stuff like that from like relationship shippers and stuff and all this weird shit. Certain characters should fall in love with each other. Just absolute wild shit, right? Just what the hell are we even talking about? And this is the person like largely responsible for almost all of the narrative of Final Fantasy being like personally attacked by a lot of people. What I have to tell you is that the majority of developers are not as hyper focused around like a thing in its fandom as much as you think they are, to the point where once they're exposed to that fandom, it is like the epitome of that Simpsons gag. Hang on a second. It like this situation is hilariously true.
Hi, question from Miss Bellamy. In episode 2F09, when Ichi plays Scratchy's skeleton like a xylophone, he strikes the same rib twice in succession, yet he produces two clearly different tones. I mean, what are we, to believe that this is some sort of, a magic xylophone or something? Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
I'll field this one. Let me ask you a question. Why would a man whose shirt says genius at work spend all of his time watching a children's cartoon show?
I withdraw my question.
Excuse me, honey.
And this is obviously like a parody. Right? I mean, clearly is a fucking parody. This is the case for like a lot of shit. And a lot of the people that are involved in some of these games like aren't the same people than before. I'm saying it's a parody. I'm giving people the benefit of the doubt, okay? I think like hyper fandoms that just are only trying to prove like a true fandom situation, I think is the worst. I think that is actually at the point where this is not benefiting anybody, and all this is a massive amount of gatekeeping. It's just gatekeeping to the point where it's like it's painfully obvious, doing no beneficiary to anyone. It's not producing a quality conversation, and it's only just, yeah, it's ego wanking. I have to also interject why this is such a rough thing, and this isn't just for Final Fantasy, this is also for like a lot of fighting games, bro. Dude, I've jumped in and I've played a lot of fighting games that I might not have played before, and you can't even imagine how many times I have been told by hyper fandoms that you're not a true fan of this, you're just playing it to play it, or you know, you're not into this as much as I am, therefore you don't deserve whatever reward there is. I mean, you know, you guys know exactly what games I'm talking about, and I've made videos about these games, and I don't stop, I don't care. But the collective following of those specific games are all over the place, where it's like, he doesn't even like this. Like, what is he even doing it? I'm guilty of being on the opposite end of this, and not on the opposite end where I've been like a hyper fan, you're not worthy or anything like that, because I do remember feeling these feelings when I was like maybe 13 years old, right? Or even younger, like an 8-year-old. You don't deserve this, I'm a true fan. Like, I get it, but it's like 8-year-old shit. So I made a little show that not a lot of people are maybe aware of now because it was so long ago. I had a situation where I've created a narrative, and we have our friends that are involved, and we wrote them and filmed them, and there's like 40 to 50 episodes of this shit called Assist Me. So it's this little show that was, you know, obviously kind of popular for a little while, that has taken hiatus here and there over the past few years. And I have had an interaction with somebody about the show that I've made, and was asked a specific question about a specific like thing in the show. I completely forgot we did that. I had to tell them, you just reminded me that we did that. And it wasn't like, oh no, did you strike the chord of this and it makes that noise? It wasn't like that. It was more like asking about this one scene because they loved that scene so much. And to me, in my head, it was just a scene that we did. It was a thing that we produced at the time, and after it was out, I never thought about it again, to be completely real. When you're in the situation where you're like producing things for a very long period of time, I've been doing this for 10 years now, 10 plus years streaming, even more making YouTube videos. But if I'm in a situation where 10 years ago we did something, some folks really like this, and all of a sudden, like, people can recite this shit verbatim. I couldn't even do that. I couldn't even remember exactly what we said or what the individual episodes were about. And it's simply because even though you're the creator of something, you don't revisit your old things constantly. Not all the time. In fact, I like to do that on our anniversary streams and shit, because I like to revisit these things because I've practically forgotten like what happens in this scene, and I'm being reminded what happens in this scene so much. After you make so much shit, there's only so much you can like retain about every single moment, and as there's so much stuff that happens throughout the years you do shit, you're just on to the next thing. And I do the next thing, gotta work on the next thing, gotta get ready for the next thing, yada yada yada. But that is not the case for like fans. That's not the case. People like grow obsessions with this stuff, sometimes healthy obsessions, but sometimes like unhealthy obsessions. And it's like, wow. So that just brings me back to this whole like much less hyper fandoms that are feeling this way. And you have to put yourself, which is hard for people, in the shoes of the developer, because all the developers are trying to do is to make something that makes the most people happy, because you can't make everybody happy. I think developers know you cannot make everybody happy. You can hit a chord that feels like it's not completely betraying what the original thing is, much less also being enticing for a new audience and trying to find a wonderful like even ground. And I think 7 Remake has done a really good job with that, you know, just in general. But then you get like the crazy like layer upon layer shit of like shipping quests, and people just hyper focused on this character needs to fall in love with that character, and it's like, whoa. And that is a result of thing existing for like 20 to 25 years and people being hyper focused on it. Like, there are people out there that have made this element of fandom their entire identity. And here's what I'll say. I think developers kind of enjoy interacting with a person like me that has a relatively level head and not a hyper fan. I can't recite to you every piece of dialogue that's in Final Fantasy VII. I can't recite to you, you know, every single thing that's in my favorite fighting games of all time. In fact, I like going back and discovering things I did not discover before, knowing every frame of animation, much less, you know, every single thing that could happen in Third Strike. Third Strike's my favorite fighting game ever, but I love it when new shit is discovered and I just didn't know about it. I think it's awesome. I think it feels very good to be reintroduced to something and not know. And that's kind of the thing that I'm going to boil my conversation down to. I appreciate not knowing stuff sometimes, right? I appreciate being a fake ass fan. I'm going to be real. I like being in a situation where like discovery is kind of a priority in the same way that we have, you know, new news about this game that I'm trying to like teeter on the edge for. I don't want to be a hyper fan and know everything. I really don't. There's definitely value to have a pretty good knowledge of this situation to try to like ride that barrier between being like a fan, much less not like a hyper super duper ultra fan. Weirdly enough, just because of the communication I've had with developers and stuff, that has gotten me in many games, many situations, front and center to speaking distance with the people that make this shit. And guess what they ask me? They ask me like what you would like about this. They like specifically want my input on this kind of stuff to like make people happy. I think that's a bit of a very beneficial situation for me because I feel like I want to communicate not just the shit that I would want, because if it's just the shit that I would want, it would be pretty clear that, you know, all that stuff would just happen all the time. They're just trying to make me happy. I try to communicate the stuff that I think would be like dope. This would be cool if this happens. I think this would make a lot of people happy if that happens, you know, while also satiating a lot of my personal feelings about it. Like, and that only comes with experience of the 10 plus years of streaming. I think that actually the streaming part is really involved and more than YouTube, because at least with 10 years streaming, I see live reactions of how people react to stuff when new shit hits the fan, and you get to see that experience, right? So much so that developers sort of use like my guttural reaction to stuff as like, oh, this worked. To the point where like I personally know of like several devs, and I truly, if any of them are watching this, I truly appreciate it, where they will gauge the response of my reaction, much less reaction videos to certain announcements, as what they're doing is right or wrong. Like, did we hit something? Does it make him happy? And you guys know me. I mean, I'm known as like the guy that gets really excited about stuff. Granted, I appreciate it. For anybody that actually watches a lot of my videos, you know that I'm not like that all the time. And I'm only that way for the things that I think are good. It's just that the things that I think are good, like the hype man shit, is the stuff that gets viral, and the stuff where I'm like, yeah, I don't know, like this was only okay, which happens pretty frequently, just doesn't get to as many eyes and ears, right? Still, I can tell you when things have not been good, I do hear from devs that stuff also makes it into conversational pieces about development, which is good, which I think is like beneficial. If there's one thing I want to use is the influence that what we somehow created to actually make shit better in some way. Usually in the eyes of super hyper fandoms, that is not going to line up with what they feel. It's really not. To be real, I feel with super hyper fandoms, there's only one thing that's going to make them happy, and it's for the thing to be like the old thing. It just needs to be exactly like the old thing, and anything that's new is sort of rejected as being a bad idea and or lazy. And here's the thing, you can understand why they feel that way, because the old thing is what they've been focusing on for 10 to 20 to potentially 30 years. These things have been around for so long. Do not change the thing. So I get it, right? What I'm trying to say is I understand why hyper fandoms are that way. I'm saying the hyper fandoms and the way they are expressing their information and communicating what they want makes the developers fucking terrified. It actively makes developers not want to make games. The sad part is that they're usually the most vocal. They have to deal with that shit. God bless Nojima-san having to deal with the stuff he did recently. Ed Boon is a goddamn patron saint having to deal with the shit he's had to deal with for so many years. I can't even believe it, man. That guy must be, you know, having to meditate 18 days a week. That's the thing I'm trying to communicate here, is that the way you communicate your fandom terrifies devs sometimes. And you have to find a new way of doing this stuff, if it does mean that much to you, to try to do it in a way that seems productive while still resilient, but not malicious. And it comes across as like, Jesus, man. Like I said, even in my situation where I talked about the thing that happened to me, that person wasn't upset by that. They were sort of like shocked that I forgot I made that. So it wasn't like that offended them. I had like a real moment where I was like, you know what? I've been making this stuff for so long, I forgot, dude. So unfortunately, I couldn't give them the answer they were looking for, which must have been disappointing. But that's the way a lot of developers are. You just, when you're a creative person, you want to do new shit and move on. You really do. So that's the end of my hyper fandom rant, dude. It's just some gross shit. Long story short, there's an answer to this. The answer is that Twitter's a goddamn trash fire and needs to be purged. Like, we just got to restart. Just do something else. Trash fire ass website. Get the fuck rid of it. Destroy it. Let's just do something. Just sweet, good goddamn, dude.